Vielen, vielen Dank, Dirk. Ein sehr, sehr spannendes Panel. Und Dirk, du hast dir jetzt wirklich die Pause wohl verdient. Gönn sie dir und ich glaube, den Kaffee hast du sowieso schon getrunken. For this session here on stage, we will also switch to English as we have an English-speaking guest coming up for you guys. Developing video games also means developing and inventing new technologies, from engines to virtual reality to voice recognition and so on. Innovation is key, that's true, but not only for the gaming industry. In a few moments, we'll enjoy our session, The Role of Video Game R&D in the Global Innovation Economy, a Catalyst for Global Technology Adoption. Phew, that's a really long title, but we will clear the fog right now with our next guest, the managing director from Epic Games, who will tell you all about how video game technology can be used in other economic sectors. Please give a warm welcome for Quentin Stes-Pollet.
Hi, everybody. Oh, that's loud. Oh, everybody is still at lunch, it looks like, so we're gonna start anyway. So I started in the game industry in the early 2000s. I was coming from technology and music before that, and what really attracted me to the industry was, and I came across in my job to basically mass multiplayer game in Asia. I was located in Asia at the time, and what fascinated me at the time is how technology, art, storytelling, and innovation and social were coming all together through the industry, and that's what got me in. In the last couple of years, we had a lot of bad news. Everybody was locked at home, but for the game industry, it was a very special time. And people like the World Health Organization, Oxford University started to recognize the positive effect that our industry could have on people, and how it actually playing games, made people feel better. We all know that here in the industry, but it doesn't seem evident to the larger world. So the talk I'm going to have today is really to show how the game industry has been driving through gamers and through the member industry, has been driving innovation, has been inspiring innovators, and has been setting up a lot of the design constraints that technological innovation has lived on. I'm not the only one to say that. I'm not the first one to say it. MIT Tech Review, games are the impetus for computer evolution. Our friend Linus, there's a reason games are always on the cutting edge, and why this is the first place, the first type of program that programmers create. Artificial intelligence and games have been inextricably linked since the dawn of the computer era. Murray Campbell, IBM Deep Blue, one of my ex-employer. And it's not really a complete, okay, here we go. Can we get the next one? All right. It's not very complete without having that influencer on the screen. So, video games are a powerful force for getting young kids interested in technology. It has way bigger knock-on effect than people may realize, our friend Elon. And then I was looking for, a lady also who said something, and gaming can make a better world. Jane McGonigal. We can make a better world, by the way, by making it a more diverse world, and I think it can come to all of us to start making games that address more minorities and diversities, because we can influence the change, like I'm going to demonstrate. We influence the change on technology innovation. We can also influence the change on diversity, etc. That was just a small parenthesis. So, early compute days in the 50s, there wasn't any TVs, there wasn't any mobile, there wasn't any show, and the way science was popularized, it was by having big fairs where people would come and see the progress of science. And very early in the computing, games were used to demonstrate the power of compute. So example here, Bertie the Brain, tic-tac-toe. There was quite a few of those games that were used for to demonstrate really the power of computing and popularize it, and again, influence and inspire young people to take on computing. In the 16, scientists started to think about how can we evolve programming? How can we, teach computer to do things? And so the first AI exercise were around game of checkers, and then further down, the Chinook program that really perfected the strategy for checkers. And then you remember in the 90s, Deep Blue beating Kasparov, and more recently, the Go strategy that was also, the best players in the world were also beaten by computers. So again, example to inspire people, teach computer, and always it comes back to game and game theory and the industry. And then, when computers starting to be a little bit more widespread, enter universities and research centers, a lot of new scientists got to know and started to play with games like Space War that were installed and copied on all of those computers all around universities. And that has inspired a lot of innovators like Bill Gates, like Nolan Bushnell from Atari. And those were really the first computer that first game that were, that really had impact on key people that have created our industry today. In particular, the first tennis game with an oscilloscope, not even a normal screen, was also available to Nolan and inspired him to create Atari. And so the dawn of video game console, Odyssey, was actually created by people who were inspired by this. That's the first time compute gets into the home. Over a 5 years period, this console got a bit in 350,000 homes in the US. So that's really the first time compute gets into the home and influence again people. In the early 70s, when the first microprocessor were invented, they were thought about just as simple calculators that could do operation and research. But some programmers of pinball machine thought this could be a great opportunity to leverage this to lower my cost, lower the weight, make the cost of fabrication lower, and started using microprocessor inside pinball machine, and therefore bringing it into all the entertainment arcades and bars and all of those places. The next generation of the console with a much larger impact was Atari, the 2600 console, that in turn get over a period of 20 years in about 30 million homes. You can imagine the impact and the influence that has on all kids like me at the time that were for the first time seeing compute. The concept there also was the first time that they separated software and hardware and that cartridge, and that really gave birth to the development industry. Activision started really at that time to prepare content for those consoles that were in so many homes. That was created a market. It drove down the cost of processors, and justified the emergence of a totally new industry. And then, graphic interface. So IBM in the early 80s wanted to drive personal computer into the home, move from the console, one function type of compute to more open compute. They needed an interface to really make that more accessible than DOS. And so they asked Microsoft to create some of those color interface, and first a bunch of games were born to that. Bill Gates was even in some advertising for them, and it really changed the way computer machine interface were being developed after that. SimCity, you'll remember, it revolutionized urban planning. It was just a simple game at the time. It worked so well. It vulgarized and made it available and popularized urban planning so much that very quickly universities, federal agencies adopted it as a tool to teach, but also to test scenarios for urban planning and all the complex problem that comes with it. In the early 90s, Jensen created NVIDIA, and his idea was, how do I accelerate 3D graphics? How do I put a separate processor and start accelerating 3D graphic? And so after a couple of iterations, his first popular GPU came out, right? So that was really developed for gaming, and increased the power of compute for 3D graphic up to 700 times. Now those chips are now, as you know, used across industries to do 3D graphics, but to do just compute. They're just massive compute, and they're born from an innovation that was focused on game development again. And Nintendo, great innovators we all love, were the first 3D interaction pioneer. So they, a lot of the things that we assume is normal in the industry today, whether it's the camera view, whether it's how you move into a 3D space and how you interact with it, were actually innovated by Nintendo on the 64 platform with a couple of games, Super Mario as well as Zelda. So again, redefining. And then what I was mentioning in the beginning, in Korea, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the government decided to pick big broadband pipes in every home and promote computer penetration, etc. And their mass multiplayer gaming that existed in the West, but at a much more confined, small sub-niche, exploded, and e-sport exploded. And in turn, when China started to develop the same infrastructure, the Korean games came there, were adapted, and then a local industry emerged. And their social aspect of gaming appeared and drove a lot of adoption also of things that we take as granted today, like voice chat, video chat, microtransaction. All of those innovations came from mass multiplayer gaming in Asia. On a different side, mobile also, you remember the first Nokia phones, and that had a little game called Snake. And that was so popular that Nokia thought they needed to develop a phone specific for gaming, which was the Engage, which didn't work too well at the time, although it was very exciting for the game industry, etc. Didn't work so well at the time, but 4 years later, Apple came up with the iPhone that brought the computer inside our pocket and always on. And that innovation was driven and was successful in large part because of games. Today, if you look at the number of transactions in the App Store, from historically, it's always been game at the top. It's always been game that's been driving a lot of things. And mobile phones are continually improving with game and game constraint as the main focus for innovation. Late 90s, early 2000, game was becoming so popular, the industry was growing so much that game engine appeared, right? Editorial tools for game that didn't need to be each developers didn't need to build themselves from scratch, so we could produce more game and faster. So Unreal Engine, little pitch from me. Unity, basically started to popularize and make game development much cheaper, much more accessible to many more people. Also, in the background of that, a lot of people across industry started to think, wow, this is interesting. I can now take those game engine and create simulation that will serve my business. And so I think, today you'll see, and I'll show later in the presentation, there's a lot of innovation that are using game engine. In the 2000s, at the time I was again at IBM, IBM and Toshiba developed the first chip for the PS3 that was super popular. It was the first multi-thread, multi-core chip that went commercial. It was so successful and brought the cost down of chips so much that they were quickly used into blades that were into data center. They were, stringed together to create at very cheap cost supercomputers that were then used for, space research, medical research, all those kind of innovation that had nothing to do with gaming initially. The Kinect effect, Microsoft launched, as a game, Kinect with the motion sensor systems that has also been used for many innovation in many commercial enterprise as well, to leverage very precise motion sensor systems. It's still used today in HoloLens for AR, etc. So very quick innovation, very popular, that really changed the way, again, we interact with technology and with data. And then cloud gaming, right? Gaming requires high bandwidth, low latency, and super stability. Well, that's been the constraint, and games have been taken as a constraint to drive really a lot of innovation in cloud and in 5G and basically in distributed computing, because those are the biggest audience and those are the customers we need to satisfy. And so a lot of the design constraints that have been put on those systems are actually driven by gaming. XR, we had a VR bump in the mid 2010, and really now in the last 2 years, thanks to Alex, and the new Oculus has been driving VR back up. Now there's 10 million install of VR. Who would have thought that 5 years ago? So amazing drive again, and again drive. Gaming driving the penetration into the home and the mass production of new technology there. Then there's use of those concepts of game technology for other innovations. So Foldit was a scientific program, basically a distributed computing software and game that allowed people to visualize proteins and innovate into protein design and et cetera, et cetera. And so in terms of medical experimentation, it's been used, and lately it's been used for COVID as well. I have only 3 minutes left, so I'm going to accelerate a little bit. NASA also has built this program that you see above here. This presentation will be available, so you'll be able to read all the details further. I'm sorry for the speed here. But NASA, used that again to popularize, space travel and building spaceship, etc. Now you'll all agree now that we are at a very special moment now where a lot of technology are coming together and are critical points, right? I spoke about game, I spoke about cloud and 5G and network and devices. I think artificial intelligence and automation and drones and all of those things are coming together. And then interactive technology and game engine that brings all of this together is really getting to a point where a lot of industry are jumping in and leveraging this new environment, this new immersive collaboration opportunities to really accelerate, again, innovation. Our brain was evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to perceive reality with our sense in 3D and in real time. And we are able to interpret and understand much more data if they are presented in that manner. And so game engine and game technology are really allowing us to take synthetic data from all around, from all the systems and all the things we've created, and understand them better and collaborate with this data better as those tools are made for game creators who like to work all together. So broad adoption of all those technologies in many industries, mainly through game engine. It's changing the way we make movie. It's changing the way we have broadcasting and how broadcasting and information and news is presented. It's impacting manufacturing design, from factories to products to cars. It's getting into cars, so now all those HMI systems that you have in cars are more and more using game engine to present and to get updated and to allow all kind of things that were not possible with those static technology that were used before. Training in simulation, a lot of our place, it's too dangerous or too risky or too expensive to train with the real thing. By having simulations of whether it's using a machine or going in combat on all of those things, we're able to we're able to improve the outcome and train people better. I think AI supported augmented creation, as something that we have experimenting with right now, and that's very popular. Creating a synthetic human image in the past was, taking months of work by many different developers, and would cost up to $1 million to do. And now it's free, it's on the web, it's augmented by AI in terms of creation, so it helps you create. And the kids in literally a few minutes can create what the industry 5 years ago was taking months and costing a lot of money to do. Scanning also has massively improved in a very short term, creating those experiences, whether it's in architecture, whether it's in games, whether it's in the movie making. It depends on us being able to create this content very quickly and very cheap. And by scanning the world and making it available to creators in very high resolution, we again bringing down the cost of creating content and moving things around. So this was very fast. There's thousands of other examples of how this works. I'm actually very interested to gather some of those examples. So, if you have some examples you have in mind, please just send me the links, drop me a note on LinkedIn, and we'll collate. And maybe I can come next year and spend 2 hours explaining the same thing to you. And I will leave you now with a quick video to show you some examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you can give a warm applause to that one. Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now it's also time for our Q&A session. So if you, in the audience, have a question, just raise your hand. Oh, we have some. Okay. So Lily, my colleague, will come to you, and then you can ask your question to Quentin.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Quentin, for the talk. Oh, this is real close. Thank you for the talk, Quentin.
Thank you.
The advancement of video games into our society to make it a more humane society isn't something that I think needs to be argued amongst us, but more so what yours is a technical advanced society that is advancing, where like moral and empathetic things are at the core of a whole humane society, like race, class, gender disparities, like all these type of things. The role of gaming in that, especially you working at like Epic or something like that, how does that play into it? I mean, like I just saw a police simulator out there, and I don't know how that's gonna play out in real life, but like, what do you think the role of games in making a more ethically humane society is, and how can they be put to use in that way?
Well, I think, to me, like I said earlier, I think what's important is that we try to be inclusive initially. And so for me, that we make games for all those minorities or majorities like women, that's very important. And we make representation. So we make sure that in our games there's representation of the diversity of people and of humanity, right? So I think that's a way to communicate, like movies, right? Medias are very important. They're part of our psychological makeup. And if we can influence the perception of the world in that manner, I think it's really important. But when I look at the industry overall, the diversity is lacking in the industry itself, the creators, the engineers, etc. And so, in this talk, I describe how games has influenced and inspired a lot of people. And so I think there's one thing around making it accessible and try to bring people from diversity in the industry. There's another aspect which is inspiring them, right? It's making people believe they can be part of this. I mean, when you look at some of the numbers in engineering school, they're like, 3 or 5% of women, very little people of colors, etc. How do we inspire them to show them there is they have a chance to be part of the industry, and they can have fun, and they can be part of that whole journey, and it's not just white boys in there, right? So I think that's very important, that we have a social responsibility as an industry to be inclusive in our representation, and also to make an effort to inspire and welcome, minorities inside the fold. And I think we actually have the power, much more than many in our industry, to change the world in that aspect as well.
Yeah. Do we have another question here in the audience? Well, if not, I have many questions here on my card for you, Quentin. Why do you think it is now a crucial time to focus on investment in video game technology?
Well, I think the opportunities are endless. People are so excited about this industry. I think it's driving entrepreneurial spirit in a way that many other sectors don't. And I think there's, investors have started to recognize that, and we can see in the market right now there's a lot of money and a lot of attention to the game industry. So it's a great time to start, to be a startup, to be part of the industry. And I believe the impact will continue to grow as we've seen it. It's accelerating, and we are impacting many industries, and so it's probably a good place to put your money as an investor.
So also Epic as a game developer, as engine developer, and also as ecosystem developer has a profound impact on video game technology. So what sectors from non-gaming economy are the most interesting ones for you as potential clients?
I mean, we're interested by all of them. I would say that naturally we are in entertainment and media, so we've made a lot of effort to convert other segments of that industry, whether it's animation, movie making, and we believe that, real-time collaboration for artists is really moving the needle. And if you look at, film, or animation house that have been adopting real-time technology in their pipeline, it's changed the way artists are collaborating. It's much more fun because they feel like they are together real time, and what they do, they have an immediate feedback on, and they can redo things much faster, much lower cost than with traditional linear pipeline. And so, media and entertainment has been a big area of focus for us. But driving adoption in automotive, in architecture visualization, in simulation across the board, from medical research to military, etc., has been also very rewarding and exciting. And there's a feedback loop where those industries then bring content back into the game industry and bring innovation back into the game industry. So it's a virtuous circle that's now really encompassing the whole economy.
So last look to the audience. Maybe you came up with a question over there.
Hello, Quentin. Thanks for a nice talk. I've been thinking a lot about digital distribution and a few actors and monopolizing tendencies in the industries, and with the tech sector and the likes, and discoverability, because now we have a lot of information flow. We have like this information, and we have a lot of influencers and stuff for an indie developer. Discoverability and publishing, and also the concentration of huge corporation. What do you think the future is? Will it continue to concentrate like Microsoft, Epic, Valve, or what do you think about that?
As sectors grow, concentration is a fairly standard, evolution. I think though, the passion of the gamers and the number of gamers that want to get in the industry, want to become creators, create an endless supply of new startup and new challenges that we don't see in many other industries. There's nothing more exciting than to be here and talk to all the startups and all the people making their own game. And game engine technology I talked about earlier have made that easier and easier. Literally, single person team can now make some things that will go and have impact at the worthwhile thing. So I think I agree with you. There's always a danger of monopolies and concentration, etc. But I think it's an industry which has, in its identity, literally. An endless flow of challengers and of newcomers, right? So I agree with you. It's worrying. We should look at it. But I am, on the same time, quite optimistic because there is that challenge and that innovation that's really, catching a very wide audience and bringing people together.
Thank you so much, Quentin. If you have any questions, then you can just talk to him, right?
That's right.
Hey, you stay here. Yeah, you stay here. Just talk to him. Or on LinkedIn, as you also mentioned. Thank you so much. I'll take this one because that's ours. Okay. So this is your applause.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.